Welcome along, everybody, to the Power Platform Community User Group of March 2022. Thank you all for attending. It's great to see everybody, and I'm sure that Bill, Yeoman and myself have got a lot installed for you today. Just to kick things off, just to let everybody know that we are recording this session, and if you can't hear anything, please check your speakers settings. For questions about the webinar, we would like you to post into our Power Platform Community User Group. The webinar is proudly presented by the Power Platform Community User Group, and you can contact the user group with the link listed on the screen. As I just said, sort of jumped a slide there. For any questions or follow-up, please post into the user group where discussions and members can answer your questions for you. The agenda for today is we'll have a quick introduction about the presenters, then into the current news on the Power Platform. The main presentation is the automation of Microsoft 365 Management using the Power Platform. We also then have a discussion about a solution there where Bill will talk about the Dataverse database system, a bit of a Q&A, and at the end, a virtual cup of tea. A quick introduction about our presenters. Myself, Andrew Gallagher, Bachelor of Science and plenty of Microsoft certifications, and I like to blog. As for Bill, same with the computer science certifications. And Yeoman, he's got the Master of Commerce and, of course, all of our Microsoft certifications. If you do have any questions about the certification process or any of the Microsoft exams, please don't hesitate to ask us at the cup of tea or in the community user group. Now let's move on to our Power Platform update. And I'm going to kick us off there with what I found online. What was two things that I found. One was that that model-driven apps is now available for makers. So you can now configure a mobile offline profile for your model-driven app right in the Maker portal. Previously, only admins were able to create an offline profile, but now you, the maker, can enable offline for mobile users, and you no longer need to manage a separate user access list just for offline support. When you configure offline in the app designer, all users will have access to your app and will be able to work offline. With this new mobile offline first experience, your users will see better device performance, a more responsive app, and more importantly, lower battery usage as apps make fewer connections to the server. And with offline first, data presented in your app is consistent regardless of network connectivity. There's no need to toggle anymore for users to switch offline to online mode. So basically, users will not forget to sync their changes back to the server. The app greatly does this automatically for you. And my second bit of news, which I just decided to throw in there at last minute, was that in the App Store, in the new, in the Windows App Store in Windows 11 and Windows 10, you can download a Power Apps player. So this means you can run your Power Apps directly through the app from the App Store and not have to load it up through the web browser. Now I'm going to quickly hand over to Yeoman for his news on the Power Automate desktop.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And I just have, if you remember from last month, I was presenting on the Power Automate desktop. Well, just after we did our presentation, Microsoft started releasing a new update for the Power Automate desktop, which is actually pretty exciting. So you can actually have some more settings, so some performance updates for sure. And the other thing was that adding some extra notifications and monitoring of your Power Automate desktop. You can have them show them up in Windows notifications, or you can have a special flow monitoring window. The other things that are pretty exciting is there's a new way to extract tables from PDF documents, which is actually quite exciting because you could start maybe extracting things from PDFs into an Excel spreadsheet or possibly into a SharePoint list. So that's actually pretty exciting for maybe projects where you want to ingest documents that you receive through email or other means. And the other one is there's some new custom forms that are in preview at the moment, which are based on some of the adaptive card technologies. So that's just some of the really good updates that have come to the Power Automate desktop. And you can see by how much, even from that presentation I did right through to these new updates, that how much Microsoft is investing in making Power Automate great on desktop and of course through the cloud as well. And on that, we'll pass over to Bill, who has a user group community update.
Thanks, Yeoman. So I'd just like to have a bit of an update on how our community is going. So firstly, we're up to 18 members now. So I invite you, if you're not a member, to follow the links at the end of this presentation so that you can become a member, or invite others to join us as well. And I'll note that we now have 16 topics of discussion on our user group website. So go there into the discussions tab and take a look for yourself. There's things like question asked on how many data connectors in the Canvas app, and another note on training for the Power Platform, and how to make collaborative apps easy. So take a look at those discussions as being shown. Become a member, reply, get involved in the discussion. And also you'll note, and it's at the top of the screen, that every week when we have our weekly catch up, we put a reminder of the link to that catch up in the discussion group so that you can find us easily. And just a reminder, that's every Friday, 3:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, except on the webinar week, i.e. today, because we have our virtual morning tea after the webinar. So if you want to hang around after the webinar, we can have our discussion, or every other Friday at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So that's our little update for this month. So now I'll pass back to Andrew.
Thanks, Bill. And yeah, I do encourage everyone to come along on a Friday afternoon and catch up with us. We talk about many things. All right, now let's move on to our main presentation, where I'm just going to bring across my presentation there. I think Bill's got some questions he wants to ask, so I'll hand over to Bill there just while I bring these things over to the...
I'll get started while you're bringing up your answer to my question. So the question we posed this week was to do with a business policy. So if I'm just trying to implement a business policy where between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. I want everyone, or almost everyone, to be locked out of our system so that they're only working through the normal working hours, unless they happen to be working overtime, approved overtime or something like that. So I asked Andrew to come up with a solution to help us implement that policy.
Well, thanks, Bill. So as most system admins probably know, this was inbuilt into the normal Active Directory in Windows Server, where you could specify a user and actually select with a bit of a GUI interface which hours that the user was allowed to access the company servers. Unfortunately, with Azure Active Directory, this is no longer available to the system admins. So what we've created is using a few different tools, as in Microsoft Forms, SharePoint lists, conditional access rules, some security groups. We've set it up that managers can add a user using a Microsoft form, which then will put that user into a list, and that list can be is scheduled to be added to a security group, and that security group is used by conditional access to administer when a user can and cannot log into the system tenant or the Microsoft platform as we speak. So now one of the things to try and bring everything together and make it easier for the manager and system admins is that we've created all of this within Microsoft Teams. So rather than having to go, know what the form link is or what the SharePoint address site is, they can simply go into their Microsoft Teams, as you can see here on the screen, and within the team and the channels, you can see that I've created the forms, created the SharePoint list, and even there's nothing in the SharePoint list at the moment, and even I created a separate channel for admins where you can see the Power Automate flows. So even the system admin doesn't have to sort of, go to powerautomate.microsoft.com. He can simply get there in Teams. So let's begin on how we started this. Now, we tried to make it simple for the manager, where he can just go to the add user form. So basically, we want to add the user to a list, and to do this, we're simply asking for the user's first name, last name, and email address. The main detail on this is more the email address, because that is what is used, basically what they call the UPN. That is used in the security settings to identify the user. So I'm just filling in some details here with first name, last name, and the email address. And of course, the manager can do this and add the person to the list without actually having any administration access to the Microsoft tenant. So here I've put in Diego's details, and I've pressed the submit button, and it's thanks me for my response. And now if I come across to that SharePoint list that I was showing before, you will notice that Diego has been added to the list. Now this was done by a Power Automate flow, which over in my system admin area over here.
Andrew, so the reason the manager can do this is because he's only adding something to a SharePoint list, right? And he just needs the appropriate access to use the form and run the flow.
100%. And the form is just basically for ease of user access. I mean, potentially, if they felt comfortable with it, they could come over to the SharePoint list here and just enter the details straight into the SharePoint list, as I am here. It all has the same effect. We were just basically trying to make that interface nicer for the end user.
And I guess when you're first starting up, you could do a bulk load into the SharePoint list.
100%. Create a CSV file, if you had a whole heap of users, and import them straight in. I'm just going to delete that user. So here we have Diego in our SharePoint list, and I'll just go back to the Power Automate over here. And once again, you can see within the team, you can see all of the different flows that I've created. And the first flow here, add the user to the system access user list. It's a really simple flow. It basically just grabs the information from the form and creates the item straight into the SharePoint list. If anybody out there wants more detail on any of these flows, just please, once again, ask us in the community group. We're more than happy to sort of spend a bit of extra time running through them. And yeah, and we can go through there. And once again, there's also, as you can see here, a second form to remove the user. Exactly the same information: first name, last name, email, and once again, a flow there. Flow here simply to take the user out. Number 2, delete the user. Very similar to the ad, except one thing you do have to note is when you're deleting an item, you actually have to get the item first before you can delete it. So there is that little extra step there on the Power Automate. So now once we have a user in our list, at a particular point in time, we want to add that to our security group and remove them from the security group. So let's firstly go have a look here. And as you can see, I've already got it open, but I've opened up the Azure Active Directory, which you can do directly from portal.office.com. And I'm just going to go back a step so you can sort of see where. So within our Azure Active Directory, you can see all of the details: users, groups, identities. Within the groups, I created a new group. It was I defined it as a security group here. And very important to know when creating the flow is the object ID, but that's more on a technical point of view. And then at the moment, you can see members, owners, and if I click on members, there's no members there. So what we've done is, if I go back into Teams and back over to our flows, we've automated. We've automated here at 7 a.m. we want to remove everybody from the group. Now, the reason we want to remove the people from the group is that when they are in the group, they're blocked. So anybody in the group is blocked from logging in. If nobody's in the group, nobody's blocked. So at the moment, nobody's in the group, nobody's blocked from logging into the tenant. So at 6 p.m., everybody that's in the group, everybody that's in the SharePoint list is added to the security group. And by adding them to the security group, they are then blocked from logging into the tenant. And then at 7 a.m., when we want the users to come back in, let's remove them out of the group, and they can all log in. So let's have a quick look at the ad. I've probably sort of got these two around the wrong way because you would be adding them too. So let's have a quick look at what this does. So it picks up each item in our SharePoint list, simply gets the user profile of each user. So you can see that this is in a loop, looping through each user within the in the list, and it adds it to the group. Once again, very, very 4-step, simple, basic Power Automate flow.
Andrew, and that's where that technical piece of information is required, the group ID.
Correct, exactly right there. That group ID right there is that group ID I mentioned earlier. And this ID is picked up from here using the email address from the SharePoint list. That's the most important bit of information that we receive. The first name and last name is just basically so it makes the list easier to look at on an administration point of view.
It's because your email address in your Microsoft 365 is actually the key to being your user login or your staff's login. So everything's centered around it. And
100
without it, you can't do anything else like add it to all the bits and pieces in the behind the scenes admin that managers just don't see.
100%, 100%. So now let me just go to a bit of the back end. So as I say, here's our user group, and I'm going to click over here. Here's our conditional access policy. Now, conditional access policies is something administrators set up. This is not something that end users or managers will look at or even really know about. So system administrators will come in here and configure these in the back end. So if you're a manager and you're sort of looking at that, you need to get with your IT company or your IT support to help you set this back end configuration up. So if I quickly look at this block login conditional access policy we've created, there are a lot of settings in conditional access policy that you can use, but for this task, we've just set a couple. So basically, the first thing we want to do is which users does this conditional access policy apply to? So we can, include no users. We can include all users, which I don't recommend people do because, we're locking people out of the tenant and you do not want to lock all users, including system admins, out. So we want to select specific users or groups. And in our case, we want to select the group that we're adding our SharePoint list to, which is our restricted user system access group. So quite simply, we're including our security group. Next setting, our cloud apps or actions. We're just including all of the cloud applications, which is basically our Microsoft 365 logins. We're not including any conditions. You can set these, like if you wanted to block only, let's say, for example, a specific country, you only wanted to block, let's say you had an overseas call center and you didn't want them logging in, and that call center was run out of India, and you wanted this only to run on that, you could set up a location and only block India at specific times. But in our case, we're just blocking all users that are basically in Australia from what was it, 6 p.m. through to 8 a.m. So we're not accessing any configurations. The next one is the most important. This is the access, this is where we're blocking the access. So we're not worrying about granting any access. We're worried about, we want to block. So we've basically blocked access, and we only require the one, which is the block, and we don't set the session. Now, once you've configured this, you do have the ability to report only. So it's always good once you've set up a conditional access policy, just to test it out, just to test it out in report only to make sure that it does what you think it's going to do, and you're going to save it. So now that we've set up this policy, we're not going to do anything with it because basically the policy is run by our security group, and all we want to do now is put people in and out of the security group. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to bring over a...
So this really just reinforces that conditional access is not for beginners, and there's even people have to do certifications really. And as you're learning to do the certifications, you get to learn about things like this conditional access stuff, so that you don't get yourself into trouble, and potentially, and we've seen cases where people have locked themselves completely out of their Microsoft 365 as a result. So it is very powerful stuff, but certainly are not on knowledge and testing and the right way of doing things to actually apply it for this sort of Power Automate interactions that we're seeing right now.
100%. And that's why there's the report only, and there's also a what if function, which enables you to sort of put in specific scenarios, specific users, specific IP addresses on where they're logging in from, and it tells you the result. It says this user will have access, this user won't. So basically, as a quick test, what I've got here, I'm just going to sign into the tenant with Diego. Remember, we haven't run any of the flows to put him into the security access. So with the login, it's actually still signing me out. I should have had him signed out rather than signed in. Let's sign Diego back into the tenant. And what I expect to happen here, all going well, if I just get this password here. Diego can log straight into the tenant, no problems at all. Good morning, here we are, let's go check our emails. So while this is loading up, and here we are, we're logged into our tenant. So I'm just going to sign Diego back out. So what I've also done, coming back here, I've also made it that I can put someone into the list on a button press. So this is a different type of Power Automate. So this runs manually when I want it to. And basically I've done this. You could actually have this if, so for example, let's say someone had resigned unexpectedly, and the company they have the ability to lock people out of the tenant straight away. They don't want to go through the process of having to contact the IT company, wait for them to get back from them. Oh yeah, we need you to lock this guy out. Then, they allocate a ticket, it goes to a support person, and an hour later the person is locked out. And, potentially that's a bit of a risk, on what that ex-employee could do within that hour. So with this button press, you could give this to a manager and he could instantly put someone into the list, press the button, and they're locked out of the tenant. And on a zero security granted, or zero trust security granted for access, not giving employees access when they don't need access is, of course, another step into the safety of security and management of your tenant. So now let's get into, here we go. So add the list to our SharePoint list with a button press. Now, if I have a quick look at the flow, it's basically exactly the same, but rather than scheduled on a time, it wants me to trigger it. So let me just trigger this flow. Now these flows are quite small, so they run very quickly. They're not doing a lot. Some flows for users and system admins, like if they're a lot longer and that they get into these loops, like this took 3 seconds, but sometimes they can take minutes to run. And in an approval process, a flow may sit there for hours until that approval process is granted. So as you can see, it's got the item, found the user, Diego, and added them to the user group. So if I now come over to the user group and give it a refresh, here we can see Diego has been added into the user group. Now, by doing nothing, we don't have to touch the conditional access policy because it's already in place using this user group. If I now come over to Diego.
So how quickly does the conditional access work once we've done this generally?
It's instant. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up another browser. And the only reason I'm going to open up another browser is that the cookies on that other one can have some memory. So I'm just going to open up an incognito one here. That's important to note that, you know, with an employee potentially leaving and whatever, you do want to get the company devices back as quickly as possible, because it can have stuff remembered on it. Log in with Diego here. Stick in the password. And as you can see, the message that is received by the user that the sign-on was successful. So the username and password that I entered in is correct. I'm not being blocked because I got my password wrong, but you don't have permission to access this resource. So our conditional access policy, as you can see, has blocked the sign in. So it's perfect. You know, that's exactly what we wanted. And, you know, you can have a look at more details, which gets a bit technical, but, you know, that can be copied and pasted and sent through to IT support, because a lot of the times when a user sees this for the first time, they don't really understand why or what's going on.
Andrew, just a thought, like at 6 o'clock, this whole list is just going to be simply blocked. So I put the initial requirements in. I don't particularly want someone that's working hard to finish something off to be suddenly just cut off in the middle of doing something. So you've got a process or something to help with that?
There's two things. One is if the user is already logged into the tenant, it won't kick them off. So, you know, if they've been working 2 hours on a Word document, and, you know, it hits 6 o'clock, it doesn't kick them off. It doesn't kick them off and whatever. It will allow them to continue working over the 6 p.m. But once they log off the system, they won't be able to log back into the system. The other thing that we've done is, which I get where you're coming from there, Bill, is that a notification. A notification would be the best thing to alert the user. You know, they've been working on their Word document. They're not really, you know, in the headspace, oh, you know, God, it's coming up to 6 o'clock. So what I did there was, sorry, I just minimized the wrong screen there. What I did was I created another flow that at 5 o'clock, anybody that is in the SharePoint list, let's send them a Teams message. So as you can see here, let me just open this up, and I don't think I showed this before, but here is the reoccurrence of the automation. So once a day, this runs every day at 1700 hours, and it started a couple of days ago. So this has been running. So once again, let's get our SharePoint list and let's post a message in their chat. Just a little message here. Hi, here I am picking up their first name and last name. Please be aware that your access into the system will be revoked in 1 hour. So let me go back. I also created a button press on this one too, where we can just manually run this process. And once again, this will be a very, very, very quick process. So here it goes, picks up our SharePoint lists, loops through each person into the SharePoint list, and sends them a message. Now, when I go back, when I'm going to try and log back in, I'm actually going to show you guys this. I'm going to need to take Diego out of the security group, because of course, at the moment, he's blocked. So here I've created, removed the list from the group. So this is basically the flow that will run at what was it? It was either 7 or at 7 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so let's run that. Run this flow to remove Diego out of the list. So it's a simple, you know, it's a simple on-off. Put the list in, take the list out. which seems very, very simple, it's great because the Power Platform is giving us this simplicity, but the power of what we're doing is huge. Okay, so as you can see here, that took 2 seconds. Remove Diego from the group. And if I come back over to our user group here and give it a refresh, Diego's been removed from the group. Now, let's log in with Diego again. As you can see, Diego's out of the group. We're logging into the group. Now, if I come across to Diego's teams, what I expect to see after manually running the 5 o'clock flow is basically a new message in Teams. Now, you can pick how the user receives this message. I think most companies will be using Microsoft Teams, but if you're not, we could send this message as an email, or potentially you could even send it as a text message. So as you can see up here, Diego's got a new message in his chat. Let me have a look at what that is. Here it is, and there's my message from myself, the administrator, via Power Automate. Hi Diego, please be aware that your access into the system is going to be revoked in 1 hour's time. Kind regards, management. And yeah, so basically that Diego gets that message, and it also reminds him, 6 o'clock's not late enough to be working. Go home and enjoy your evening. So, Yeoman, Bill, you got any questions on what I've just demonstrated there?
Yeah, Andrew, I do. You and I, we go way back with learning about stuff like this, not just Microsoft 365, but even back to the days of the old servers on premises. I mean, are you like me, just in shock and awe as how powerful you can put these sorts of things together that were never able to be done into literally the hands of managers to do exactly what they wanted to do without interacting with IT? Because I'm just stunned. This is powerful.
Well, I've shown you one thing on blocking users, but within conditional access, you can set up a whole raft of different policies within there. Like I showed before, you can narrow it down to countries. You can narrow it down to IP addresses. You can have it that, so for example, let's say you needed to give an external party admin access, and you didn't have the licensing for privilege management identification. Well, realistically, you could set that up here with a few policies, to give a third party access for 1 hour, and you don't have to be remembering that you've given them that access, because you've set this up where it could just automatically log them off. So yes, the power that it gives you, and the thing that I love is the power that it gives the manager without even having to give him any administrator access into your Microsoft tenant is phenomenal. It's just it gives him so much power, and the ease in which he does it.
Which probably leads me, if you're almost finished, Andrew, to my question relates exactly to that. There's many, many different things you could do. And so perhaps your SharePoint list might become a little bit messy. You might want to actually have a database and an app to help manage it, rather than forms and a SharePoint list. So I was going to show how you quickly set up a Dataverse table if we're ready to do that.
100%, 100%. So one of the reasons why you would want to, not use the SharePoint list is basically a two-dimensional table. It's a bit like Excel. You've got your rows and you've got your columns and you can put stuff in there, right? With the Power Platform and Microsoft 365, it comes with a Dataverse database, which is a fully functional database, with multiple tables, relationships, and so forth. So, yeah, if you've got that presentation or that, it'd be fantastic, Bill, if you could show how to basically create a table within Dataverse that could easily be used within this process.
Yeah, so I thought I'd just do a quick demo. We're inside the same Teams environment, but to get to your Dataverse to set up a custom table rather than a list, we go across to our left menu and click on our more apps. You get to it through Power Apps. So if I bring up the Power Apps, then we'll there's a few little steps here. So it's a little bit of a trick to try and get there. So just trying to remember what we did. I think we got to start now. And the whole idea is you don't automatically have Dataverse running in your teams. You've got to have some reason to have it running. So that's
there's also some licensing advantages of actually creating the Dataverse within Teams. For a small business, I would do it in Teams every single day of the week. In fact, creating things in Teams basically brings everything that you're creating into one space.
Yeah, so that's correct. So, and you get up to 2 gigabytes in your database, which if you stick to text, is a lot of data. So if we click on the build, now that we've got Power Apps up and going, we should get a list. I think there's one Power App in here at the moment. Operating a little bit slowly for me at the moment, but what happens once we get there is on the list, we want to see all our apps. So I'm still waiting for it to come up. So you see in management, that's Andrew's team for looking after this. We look at nothing yet. Installed apps. I haven't put an app in management yet, so I'll have to go back to security just to show you how it's done for now. Because it looks like it's taking me a bit long to go through it one step at a time. But once you get the list up, you've got to do this little trick of showing everything. Because until you show everything, you don't get the option come up that allows you to get into the table space. So I'm not quite sure why it's going so slow. It always happens this way, doesn't it? Okay, here we go. So we got this see all down here. So if I go see all, what happens is you get the Power Apps screen come up that allows you to build a solution then. And that's where you can get access to the table. See, this is your Power Apps view of a solution. And from here, we can hit new. And within new, we can hit table. So this is where you actually create your table. So what we want to do is give our table a name. So perhaps we call it our security access table. So you see, we type in a display name. It automatically makes a plural. You can change that if you don't like the way it's pluralized it. And we can say for security access. Okay, so we don't stop there. We look at, you got to create a primary column. Now, a column is the same as the column in the list. Now, it's important, if you can, when you get to Dataverse, to make this column the unique identifier, because it makes building apps easier for you. So rather than using first name here, I'm going to use user email because that's the unique aspect of what we're setting up, isn't it? So that's it. I hit save and I get my Dataverse table created for me with my first item, which is the primary item, which is our user email. But here's our security access table. So let's click on it to see what's there, our first item. So load the table, you see it. I created one column and look at this list. There's a whole heap of columns created for us behind the scenes. And the reason that is if you were a database administrator, you would recognize that for most records you create in a database, you want these extra columns. They help you manage the database and they nearly always prove useful in larger databases. So you can see automatically we've got columns that help us with identifying who created any record. We got columns that help us identify who modified the record and when they did it. We can also change the ownership of the record. It doesn't have to be who's created it or modifying it. And this is very useful if you want security over the data in the record. So, and we've got other security access and stuff. So we see that there's our primary column name. And I can't see it in this big thing, but hidden under that primary column is the name of our user email. You'll notice over here the actual real name, as opposed to the display name, has this CR65D on it. That's how you identify the ones that are created by you, as opposed to automatic. And you see there's another one here with the same name as the table. That's the unique identifier code of the record that is just created. So how easy is it to add our others? Well, we can just hit add column and what was it? First name. We'll spell it out as a nice display name because you'll notice the internal name prefixed with that CR code joins it up, first name Forest. We know it's text, we just hit done. So what will happen is up here, there's first name. You see it's bolded, not actually saved yet, but let's just add both in, first name, last name. Now, unless I hit save, we're going to discard it. So this is very important that you can do all this work. If you rush off to somewhere else and don't hit the save, it'll go missing. So make sure you hit that save table. And once that's done, you now have a Dataverse table that you can access pretty much the same way that Andrew was accessing the SharePoint list within his process flow. You just change it over to a Dataverse connector instead of a SharePoint list connector, and most of the similar things are there. Although because it's a database record, you will find that there's more you can do with it as a database record, and we can add more than just this one action. We could have multiple actions as fields and things like that added to our Dataverse without any trouble, and we can write an app within 5 or 10, our model-driven app within 5 or 10 minutes to look after it in any fashion we want.
So without by just changing from the SharePoint list to Dataverse, Bill, you've sort of created an auditing process on who was putting the data into the table. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's the advantage with the database. It will keep all these updates. You can set it audit action on so that every change to the record or any of the records gets maintained within the database, and you can access past views of it, like your version controlling and all that kind of thing. So you can keep track of who's making the update. You see it automatically shows you who modified it or whatever. So if somehow someone who's not supposed to be in there was making changes, that's going to be recorded in your database and accessible for you.
Nice one.
So I think that's the end of my demo.
Okay,
that's how simple it is to get it up and running within your team's environment.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Bill. Like I said before, yeah, no, that creates a real auditing
I
process.
think, Andrew, as you bring back the PowerPoint slide, we're probably going to move into question and answers, aren't we? So if anyone does have a question, feel free to put it in chat, or if you want, I think we're happy you can unmute yourself and come online, make it a group discussion if you've got any questions.
Okay. There doesn't seem to be any
at
questions.
the moment, there's not looking like there's any questions.
While we wait to see if any questions come through, I just wanted to sort of talk about an experience that I had this week using Power Automate. I'd set up these automatic flows to basically, as I showed you there, capture information from a form and put it into a list. Now, where I've done this before, I've basically been the main system administrator, but in this scenario, there were other system administrators, and one forgot the password and changed the password that I was using to my flow. So what that instantly did was it broke my flows. They all stopped working, but I logged in. When users started saying, "Hey, we're not seeing the information come into the lists," and the Power Platform, it sort of showed me, pop up, oh, the flow's broken, click re-identify your connection, re-authenticate your user, and I clicked on that, and it came up with all the green ticks, and I went, oh, geez, that was pretty easy. All right, all fixed, notified everybody. Oh, 12 hours later, they've all said, oh, the flow's broken again. And so, I went and had a look, and the link was broken. So I did that a couple of times, and it seemed to that seemed to fix it for about 12 hours, and then it kept breaking, talking about the user token not being valid. So the way I got around that, and this was quite frustrating because there's an event on Saturday that was sort of leading up, and I'd Googled it a bit, and lots of people seem to have this problem, but not a solution. So the way that I fixed it, and this has actually fixed the problem, was that I went into the connectors where you can actually see all of the Power Automate connectors, and I deleted them. I completely removed them. Now, I was a little bit worried about doing that it might have removed the fields to my flows. It didn't. So my flows were untouched, and these were quite detailed flows. So I was a little bit worried about that. But by deleting the connector and then going into the flow, I got a big red cross saying there is no connector here. And I recreated the connector, so not running through the fix. And by deleting and recreating the connector and reattaching that connector to the flow, fixed the problem. I then monitored it for the next 24 hours. In fact, I've been monitoring it ever since. And they've been running perfectly. So that's just one to look out for, that if login details to a user has been changed, I found just running the sort of wizard to fix the connection doesn't work in a long-term basis, but by deleting and recreating the connector solved that issue for me.
Okay, Andrew, it sounds like a manual solution that might be requiring some automation.
Potentially.
Any thoughts on what you might do or implement as a more standard practice to try and limit how often this might occur, do you think?
Oh, well, like I say, most tenants, I was the only admin with this one. So it's now something that I'm aware of, that I would actually say to system administrators, because what I'd done was I'd created a specific user for all of those flows. I'd just let the system administrators know, let's not go modifying that user password if needed. It was actually, that's what users do, isn't it? Forget passwords, change passwords.
So you'd more like have a super user for that app or power platform function.
For my small businesses, that's exactly what I do, Yeoman. I create a a specific user to run all of my Power Apps and my Power Automate in, and I allocate that my Power Platform license to do that.
I guess if you really wanted to tie down the security, you could make sure that that user belongs to a specific group that only allows it to do what you want it to do, and nothing else, couldn't you?
You could. But like I say, this was an administrator that had access to be able to change the password of that user. He simply forgot it, logged in, changed it, and broke everything. And one of the reasons why I like having a separate user for Power Automate is that if you just use a user's login, users forget passwords all the time. Users are resetting passwords all the time. So, and if you have your Power Automate flows running off these user connectors, user logins, they will break when a simple user changes the password. So that's that's why I like having a separate user account to create my Power Platform environments.
Okay, it looks like Rob's got a question. Do you want to come off to say it, Rob, or you?
Hang on, let me just have a look.
Um,
So his question is about adding Power Automate admin console into Teams. So let me just quickly bring up here. So in Teams, how I actually got, so let me go back here. So how I add that. So if I go into General here, so General's just got posts and files. So the way I wanted to, the way I added the forms, the SharePoint list, or Power Automate, I can click on the tab here, and Teams, as you can see by the graphic that's just loaded, has connectors into all sorts of hundreds, if not thousands, of different apps. Right now, some you've got to pay for, a bit like an app store. Some of these are custom ones written by third parties that you've got to pay for. But the ones that I'm using, so as you can see, the recent ones I've used is the Power Automate, the lists and the forms. All the Microsoft ones are generally free. So if I click on the Power Automate here, it runs me through a little bit of a wizard here. Welcome to Power Automate. This is a bit of a description. Do we want to post into the channel about this tab, which we do. I save that. This actually creates the tab for me. And basically, it will load up the Power Automate platform for me here. And I can create a new flow exactly as I would have done as if I'd gone into it normally into I think it's powerautomate.office.com. But see, so here it has created under the general channel now the Power Automate. I can see the flows that I've created there. I can one run of these templates. Generally, I like to create my flows from scratch because I'm specifically trying to do something. So as you can see, this screen here is identical to what you would see if you'd gone into Power Automate. And once again, I created two different channels, one for administrators, one for managers. Let's say you wanted the managers to see all of the, to see everything. I could have added the Power Automate in here. And that would have given the managers access into the Power Automate. Now, obviously, I haven't set up a lot of security, so you could set up the security to stop managers from being able to add specific things or specific users. That's just permissions and profiles configuration.
One thing comes to mind, Andrew. Let's say you are an admin. What would prevent you as the admin from being locked out, I guess, by this sort of power of Automate?
So in our conditional access policy, which I did go through very quickly, so if anyone's got any questions on conditional access policy, please go to the community user group and we'll assist you with it. And we'll put all answers in the user group. So, you know, keep an eye in there because there's lots of great information. But in my policy here, where you can include users, this is what I showed you before, you also have the ability to exclude users. So
Okay, I got you. Yep.
So within
Cool.
here, you can sort of see where I've excluded a few users. Well, basically, that stops you from locking yourself out of, but that's only of this one policy. So you need to make sure. I mean, what you could do is create like an admin security group, stick them all in there, and just make sure every policy that you create that you put in there. But once again, always to begin with, put it in report only. Don't turn it on straight away. So it reports to you what it's doing. You know, run that for a few days or a week. And there's also this what if that I quickly mentioned before. What if, where you can sort of put specific things in to see whether people are going to be blocked or not. I won't run through that now because we're sort of run out of time on this webinar. If people are interested to see more on conditional access or the what if, please post into the user group, and if people are really interested in it, we could potentially show more. But that's more, to be honest, that's more on a Microsoft 365 admin rather than a Power Platform. But this is where we're combining the two together to create powerful solutions. So I don't think there's any more questions. So we're now going to have our bit of a. Oh, sorry. Firstly, before we go to our cup of tea, let's have a look at a few resources that we've got here. Once again, I know we've said it a few times, but we are sponsored by our Power Platform Community User Group. I would like to thank Microsoft for giving us the environment to set this up and to invite our users. We've also got our learning resources from Microsoft, great resources on all of Microsoft 365, specifically Power Platform. There's lots of training that people can go to, the learning paths, and if you do some specific learning paths or attend some fundamental courses that Microsoft put on, you can, which is their training days, you can then get a couple of free exam vouchers to sit, for example, the PL 900 exam. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put more information about the training days and those free exam vouchers into the user group. So make sure you catch up there.
I can also add the slides into the event after the fact, so that you'll be able to access them through the event tab as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's another reason why you should just come straight to the community user group page. Lots of resources and the discussions are there, including the slide and probably the link that this recording is going to.
Cool. And I'd especially like to thank Bill and Yeoman, my fellow presenters, for today's presentation. And I would like to thank everybody for attending, and hope to see you guys all in the user group. I'm going to stop the recording now, but please stick around for our virtual cup of tea and just a general chat. Okay. Thank you.